There's a kind of struggle that has been in my mind for a long time. A quiet struggle on the outside, but a very loud one inside me. For most of my life, I've always believed that a person's value comes from what they achieve. Maybe because ever since I was young, I loved studying, I loved books, and I loved learning. And every time I passed an exam, reached a goal, or completed something important, I felt something deeply satisfying. A feeling that I was moving forward, that I was on the right path. And slowly, without even realizing it, I began to connect achievement with worth, productivity with deserving rest, success with deserving life itself. To the point where a part of me started seeing anything outside that framework as wasted time. Time with family, I could be doing something more productive. Going outside with my friends, I could use those hours to get work done. Rest. After I finish what I need to do. And that what I need to do does not end at all. And there was always an after. After the exam, after the project, after the next goal, and after the next stage of my life. As if life itself has been postponed until further notice. But recently I have noticed something strange. Even as I've started achieving some of the things I once dreamed about, there's still a part of me that feels unsettled, unsatisfied. A part that keeps asking me a very simple question. Am I living in order to achieve, or am I achieving in order to live? And that question is keeping myself in a real struggle. Not struggle with other people, but it's a struggle with an old belief. A belief that lives inside the child I used to be. The child who learned early on that success was the most important thing. That every time should be useful somehow. That every hour should produce a visible result. And lately I've been trying to sit down with that child and talk to him. To tell him that life is much bigger than this. That not every benefit is going to be immediately visible. And not every meaningful experience reveals its value right away. There are experiences we go through that seem random at the time. And then years later, we realize they were essential pieces of the puzzle. A random conversation, someone we met by chance, a hobby we explored for a short period, a small moment we almost forgot. And then years later, the threads began to connect. The dots began to form a picture. I often think about something Steve Jobs once said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can only connect them looking backwards.
If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later.
Only then you do realize that everything was connected somehow, and maybe that's the one of the lessons I'm trying to learn right now. To trust the journey a little more. To trust that life is not just a straight line of achievements, and that every experience leaves something behind, even if I don't understand it right now. Maybe an evening by the sea can teach you something a book never could. Maybe a brief conversation with a stranger changes you in a way that stays with you for years. Maybe a day spent with your family is much more important in the eyes of God and more important to your life than a goal you have been chasing for years. Because life is not an equation of productivity. Not everything can be measured by output, money, degrees, or the number of tasks we complete. Sometimes the value of something is simply that you lived it, that it touched a part of your soul, that it expanded your understanding of life, that it made you a deeper human being. And honestly, I'm still learning this lesson. I haven't mastered it yet. There are still days when I fall back into the old way of thinking, days when I feel guilty for resting, days when I feel uncomfortable spending time on something that doesn't produce a clear result. But at least now I notice that voice, I question it, I challenge it, and I remind myself that I'm a human being and not a machine, not a self-improvement project that needs constantly to be optimized. A human being is also a soul, a heart, relationships, memories. Tiny moments that seem insignificant at the time, but eventually become the story of life. And I think one of the most beautiful things a person can learn is to allow themselves to fully experience life, all of it. Success and failure, work and rest. Because life doesn't ask us to win every moment. It simply asks us to be present for it. Sometimes I imagine myself 20 or 30 years from now and I wonder, what will I actually remember? Will I remember the number of hours I worked, the number of tasks I completed, the number of goals I achieved? Maybe some of them, but probably not most of them. I will remember the people, the faces, the laughter, the long conversations, the ordinary days that seemed unimportant at the time, and later turned out to be life itself. And that's why I'm not trying to abandon ambition. I'm not trying to diminish the value of achievement. I'm only trying to learn something more difficult. How to strive. How to strive without forgetting to live. How to build a future without sacrificing the present. And how to reassure that child inside me. To tell him, don't worry. Not everything that looks and productive is a waste of time. Some things do not give you an immediate result, but they give you something far more valuable. They give you a life. And at the end, the dots will connect somehow in ways we can't yet understand. And one day you will look back and realize it.